Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Shane, on the Rams, 7 picks, as I said, including 3 in the 7th round. So they pick round 1, round 2, round 3. Then they're not on the board again until round 6, and then they round out strongly with 7 picks, or 3 picks in the 7th round, I should say, 2 of them compensatory picks. The mock draft consensus first-round pick is USC's wide receiver, Mekhi Lemon, for the Rams, who, despite the fact that they've got Puka Nacua for the time being and Devontae Adams, have a fairly light wide receiver room other than that. The only other option I can see maybe in the first round is an offensive lineman if they did decide to go that way. They pick at 13. That's the pick they got from the Atlanta Falcons last year. They traded so the Falcons could move up and take James Pierce.
Yeah, and look, I think wide receiver is definitely an area that they'll be looking towards because, as you're saying, it's funny. I was coming back to this and I listened to our sister podcast, so we call it now, Believe in Rams with Aaron Coscarelli, in terms of the wide receiver options and the way that they're looking at things. And look, I think long-term thinking has to come into the way the Rams are looking here. Because I've said in this podcast before that I think that there's a potential that they're starting to think about what life is like after Matthew Stafford. I'm not saying that they're trading for him. I'm not saying that they're pushing him out the door, but they have to start thinking about what happens when he does retire. I know he's MVP. He's definitely going to stick around this year. And just think of the way that they're running the cap. I mean, at the moment, their second biggest cap hit is Devontae Adams. And there's already talk that they might do, as a lot of other teams do, and move him on a year too early rather than a year too late. In which case, bringing a wide receiver into that building is pretty important, especially when, as you mentioned there, Puka Nacua, we're just not quite sure what shape he's going to be in by the time we get to the start of the season. So wide receiver could be interesting there. But just in terms of the other sort of draft picks and the way that they're building up, I mean, the question I have here is, are they going to even consider a quarterback in that second or third round pick that they have? Or is that something that they're waiting to sort of plan out, either in terms of freeing up cap space to potentially go for something big after Matthew Stafford, or waiting for another draft down the line? There is even a chat there, because at the moment I'm pretty sure the backup quarterback in LA is Jimmy Garoppolo. They might have a younger person to sit in there, kind of similar to Jalen Milroe in Seattle as being somebody else to come in there. But they haven't got a huge amount of draft capital to waste on a backup quarterback either. So it's an unusual situation that they're kind of landing themselves in as to whether that second or third round would be used in that way. But yeah, in fairness, going back to the to what to do with that 13th overall pick, I don't see them trading down from this one. I'll be honest. I'm sure the rest of the lads might see things differently in terms of the way that the Rams might want to build up capital. And look, they're fantastic. The Rams are. I love the Rams front office and the coaching staff. I mean, they have probably the best culture in the NFL, or one of anyway. And the way that they're able to sort of find players in that 5th, 6th, 7th round and bring them up to top talent, they're not like any other team. So they might have the self-confidence in themselves to trade down and build up. But I still think that with 13 overall, they're probably just going to be sitting in a position where they're going to take the best wide receiver that they can get. I did see some suggestion that is it Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State? Carnell Tate might be available. If he is available at 13, you can kind of see him jumping on that. I'm not quite sure whether he will, whether they might go elsewhere. But I did see some suggestion that he might be slipping that far down the board. And if so, I just imagine he's going to jump on it. Unless the only way I could see that the Rams really trading out is if they have preference for one receiver, that receiver gets taken further down, and then in that situation, it kind of triggers, the Bing going off on the night and somebody else kind of hopping up to that 13th spot. But I think, I think the receiver room, trying to keep it as hot as possible, as fresh as possible, and as young and therefore inexpensive as possible, trying to keep that draft space open for, I don't know, Joe Burrow next year. Who knows? I think that might be the best way for them to use their money.
Yeah, if we see Sean McVay and Joe Burrow heading to Cancun, we'll know that it's on. We just need to check their travel arrangements in next offseason. Kieran O'Donovan, the Rams going into the offseason two years ago, were feeling confident. They felt like, well, we ran the eventual Super Bowl champions pretty close, and if things had fallen our way, we could have beaten them. They entered this offseason in pretty much exactly the same space. We ran the eventual Super Bowl champions pretty close, and if things had broken our way, we could have beaten them. We had talked about the Rams, and a lot of other people talked about the Rams secondary being potentially a liability going into the playoffs. It didn't seem so in the wildcard round or in the divisional round victory on the road against the Bears, but it did eventually come back to bite them against the Seahawks, who, when Sam Darnold needed to pick them apart, was able to do so. And they've also had quite a few departures from that side. So I think we're fairly clear that they're probably going to go wide receiver in the first round. But actually, it might be the tinkering on the defensive side of the ball that gets more interesting as this draft goes on, because they do have needs to address there.
Yeah, and look, one DB that I had seen mentioned was Caleb Downs, or seen as a potential pick was Caleb Downs. The link being the fact that Mike Hunter came in from Ohio State, and he'll be now coaching the defensive backs. But I'm not sure is Caleb Downs touted to go in the first round. So unless this was a trade, unless this was a real shoot for the moon pick, maybe they might see that as too high a risk when they've got that pick. So I'm not sure either, where in the first round he's touted to land. So again, maybe you've got a trade back situation. I do think I'm more interested personally in the receiver situation, as Shane was mentioned. I think looking at Puka Nacua and looking at the offseason kind of I suppose stories and headlines, you're trusting that that Les Snead and that Sean McVay have the inside track, and they know better than us whether Puka Nacua is looking to do some PR damage control, or whether he's looking to do some personal reflection, or if he is indeed entering his Antonio Brown era early. And if that is the case, I think they just bite the bullet and take Mekhi Lemon if he's the highest available receiver. The other, the obvious, I suppose, position to watch is the quarterback and what they do in that position, because I read an article in the Athletic there earlier on today where basically saying they've got three options now to fill their backup quarterback need. We all know that Stafford is coming back, ready, great attitude. He's looking to kick ass, as he said in his own words. But you've got to make a decision. Do you re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo? I'm not quite sure. Have they re-signed him yet? Do you go all in on Jimmy Garoppolo as your backup quarterback?
There was talk that Garoppolo might retire.
Well, there you go. I don't think he's nailed on quite yet. The other two options were interesting. Do you potentially trade down in the first round of the draft, pick up a little bit of draft capital for later rounds, and then maybe take a chance on a Ty Simpson in the late first round, early second round? Or do you wait till the second round and look at the likes of a Garrett Nussmeier or a Carson Beck, who they might well see as a ready-made number two and maybe a number one down the line? So I'm just very interested to see what they do on those fronts. I think it's going to be one of those three options in the first round. And yeah, look, listening then to Kieran even and to other people, to Jordan Reed a couple of weeks ago, they are saying that secondary is quite deep, that the talent runs deep into those second, third rounds. So maybe they look to pick up a second, maybe they look to pick up a safety with that second or third pick to fill an obvious need.
Craig, if you're looking at I'm just checking the NFL IQ here, which is powered by Amazon Quick. It's a lovely little interface for anybody who hasn't checked it out yet. It's on the NFL website. Their draft preview projects Mekhi Lemon, the most obvious of their potential first-round selections. 19% of the mocks have him. The second one, though, is Spencer Fano, an offensive tackle from Utah. And another interesting one then, if they didn't decide to go O-line, you're smiling because Craig's been looking in detail at all the offensive lines in this division. He's seeing double at this point from the extensive research he's done. Another potentially interesting one that I hadn't seen linked with them before, but it does have Rams project or cautious risk written all over it, is Jordan Tyson, the Indiana wide receiver, who's had injury troubles and is arguably the most talented receiver available. But he may fall down the board because of those injury worries.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well have just read my notes off for me from the IQ there. But the reason that was the smile on my face for Fanu is because offensive tackle is kind of what I had looked at to begin with. And before I get into this, I'll just kind of run through something that I saw Les Snead had said about the way that the Rams approach the draft. And that is that their macro philosophy is that they use free agency to not be desperate in the draft. We more than likely will be better drafters because we're not reaching and we're not desperate. And that screams to me that they won't take a quarterback this year because they're not that desperate, and that they look at 2027, which arguably has a better quarterback class. I think that's no secret to anyone, and they kind of wait it out. So the Rams and the rest of the NFC West teams that we're going to talk about all need offensive tackle help. So that is pretty much where I'm going to be going for the next 3 times you talk to me. But with that Falcons pick, the Rams are ahead of the 49ers in their choice, which is ironic because the 49ers exited the playoffs before the Rams did. Rob Havenstein, their right tackle, retired just after the Super Bowl, literally the Tuesday after the Super Bowl. So they still need a right tackle, and they need to look to the future for that. They will potentially have their pick of the 2 Utah tackles in Caleb Lulu and Spencer Fanu. Funny enough, Dane Brugler, who released The Beast this week, actually has Spencer Fanu as his top tackle, like his top prospect tackle. But Fanu's like draft range seems to be from 11 to 20. So there seems to be a little disconnect there on the scouts versus the league and the consensus. But Fanu's a natural right tackle. He's played there the last 2 seasons after splitting left and right the season before. So I can't look past that. They need linebacker help. They're not taking a linebacker at 13 unless something miraculously happens and Sonny Styles drops. But if he drops outside the top 10, then something's wrong. I mean, after what he did at the Combine, Jesus. I do think that wide receiver is probably their pick. I think with Stafford, they have potentially 1 year, and this is that kind of all-in year. Like it's Super Bowl or bust, as we call it sometimes. Like they will probably end up picking Tyson, Tate, or Lemon, depending on which one falls to them. It's already been mentioned, Adams is kind of hitting that twilight of his career, and Snead is kind of intelligent enough to move on before that happens. And their third wideout, if I remember correctly, was a name I hadn't even seen mentioned. So they're not exactly stacked at that position. They have a lot there, but there's a lot of unknown there. And I think if they want to go all in this season for Stafford, they need to address it. And they're probably going to have to address it early because it's a big gap between pick 13 and pick 61.